Day 258 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine today. And as always, I'll start off with the Russian military losses. So as of the 8th of November 2022, now in the last 24-hour reporting period, we're currently sitting on 77,170 Russian military personnel losses. And just in terms of contrast to yesterday, that's about 700 or so more losses, so certainly above average. Then we'll take a quick peek at the hardware military losses. So armored combat vehicles, 24 losses for the Russian side. Tanks, a massive, absolute massive 15, always a big number for tanks. Even 5 is a big number for tanks. Artillery, 9, and 1 aircraft, which I'll get into shortly there as well. So we'll start off with moving back to the map. And starting in the Donbass today, so we'll move right in there, and in particular starting in Svatove, a very popular area at the moment, where the Ukrainian armed forces captured 21 newly mobilized men. They were from the Moscow region and captured them in the direction of Svatove. More specifically, this was a surrender from all of these 21 Russian soldiers. So they reported that their commanders just abandoned them the minute the fighting started. Some real heroic stuff right there. And these surrendering Russian forces also told the Ukrainian forces a few mostly unexpected and unusual things, including some things like some Russian groups were even shelling each other for days on end. And they said that friendly fire was a huge issue for the mobilized Russian units, as they had little to no communication with their commanding officers. So all in all, this is probably exactly the opposite of what you want an army to be. But worry not for these guys, because these guys will get fed a warm meal tonight, will sleep in a comfortable bed, then they'll be treated humanely. Then later on swapped for Ukrainian prisoners of war. And this is really the difference between a compassionate society and a Russian society. Now, to be fair, there's still a lot of good people in Russia, but showing kindness to these soldiers is literally the best thing you can do for them, because they'll almost always go back home to their Russian motherland with a fresh perspective. Then we'll move down a little bit on the map and see what we've got. So that's right, Bilorivka. So Russian forces are attempting to recapture this town with some renewed assaults today, but so far, again, it has been repelled. And then when we move down further, Bakhmut holds, but there is also the nearby forgotten front lines of South Bakhmut. So Ukrainian defenders continue to put up fierce defenses up at the towns of Ozaryivka and Kurdyamivka. And you can see those two just hanging around here. There we go. Oh, and very interestingly, the Russian forces reportedly renewed assaults on Pavlivka from the east side. I've really got to zoom out for this. So here we go, really at the south front end of the Donbass in the Donetsk Oblast in particular. So renewed Russian assaults from the same direction as before. But let's see how this goes. Because they failed here just the other day, or about 6 days ago now, had a massive loss of military personnel. Because despite the additional mobilized manpower, Russia so far continues to have persistent failures to make any real notable gains here. Oh, and add to all of that, another problem here. So the Russian forces do not have the high ground here, and they're still facing some muddy conditions. So a muddy offensive from the low ground, just like last week, and that turned out horribly. And all in all, I'm fairly certain that these Russian soldiers on their offensive here at the moment, it's just that their commanders most likely just forced them on the offensive again, saying as they always do, not one step back, soldier. Oh, just quickly in the Donbass, I did miss it. So also in this region, the Ukrainian military blew up a Russian fuel depot in the village of Chervona Diburova in the Luhansk region, so up the top there a bit. Then we'll move across to the Zaporizhia Oblast. Now again, it's about 2/3 occupied by Russia since the beginning of the war, but they haven't been able to really take much ground since. And this might be another good example why. Because the Russian army shelled the village of Lezhine in this region, again with S-300 missiles. So another big old patch of grass basically destroyed. A little bit of a walkway too I can see on this one. And I think this is the third patch of grass for 3 days in a row now in the Zaporizhia Oblast in particular. But, you know, as I said those last two times, using predominantly an air defense system, such as the S-300 missile system, to take out land targets is not going to yield the most strategic results. Then we'll move across to the other front line, so the Kherson Oblast. So the Russian army shelled the Zoloda Balka village, so that's up the top here, which was liberated about a month ago now. With S-300 missiles. So there it is, right here. So again with the S-300 missile systems. Now, once again, in this region, yet another Russian aircraft has been down. You cannot make this stuff up. This time it was the Russian Su-25 attack aircraft. Now, Ukraine's Air Force reported that their anti-aircraft missile units of the Air Command South destroyed this bad boy near the front line of the Kherson Oblast. So the Su-25s, these are the close ground support attack aircrafts, and that's a $15 million cost that the Russian forces could have done without. Not to mention the loss of the trained pilot that can take years to train sufficiently. In fact, a short while ago, the independent Russian media outlet Meduza, I believe, reported on stories about the Russian Air Force calling up 60-year-old retired pilots to fill the pilot skill shortage gap. So that's pretty embarrassing. But to me, probably the most embarrassing Russian skill shortage goes back to the month of, I believe it was May, when Russia was running out of soldiers before they even started their military conscript mobilization efforts. And they reportedly resorted to sending the actual army training personnel to fill the gaps on the front lines, which is really the last group of people in your arsenal that you want to send to war. It's a short-term fix, sure, but it creates a long-term problem. Because later on you're just stuck with major training gaps for your army, your military, infantry, soldier personnel, your troops. And I do wonder if that's some of the reason why these conscript mobilized Russian troops are not even getting trained, and we know this quite well. It's quite the fact now. And also in this region for the Kherson Oblast, so Russia continues to forcibly deport civilians from Kherson out of their homes in all areas, north and south of the Dnipro River. So they push them really, really far away. A couple of instances they've actually sent them to Russia. Then we'll move across to the Odessa Oblast, or really the Black Sea area around it. So a very small number of Russian drones and Caliber cruise missiles were taken out in this general region in the last 24 hours. So not many to speak of at all taken out. And really the back end problem for Russia here is Russia's modern missile stockpiles are really starting to get low in number. Apparently they're really starting to reach minimal defense levels for any nation. So these guys should really not be going on the offensive in any country. Oh, also, this should be more of a news piece, but the next part on this map is really great stuff. So, Turkey denied Russia entry for 2 of Russia's warships into the Black Sea. And I need to switch to the satellite image to show you a bit more. So, to give you a bit of better context here, the country of Turkey denied access 9 months ago at the start of the war to these 2 warships, citing the reason as being that these warships would just fire on Ukraine. Because the country of Turkey controls the point of access into the Black Sea basin, so it's hard to see here. It doesn't want to load up, but you can see you've got 2 points of entry for the Black Sea that actually go directly through Turkey. And although Turkey stopped the entry 9 months ago, this news is relevant now because just in the last 24 hours, these very 2 same Russian warships finally left this location to go back to East Russia, very far away from where they came from. As they were actually just sitting idly in the Mediterranean Sea, so around here, for that full 9 months. Just beyond direct shooting range of Ukraine. So close, yet so far. And the implications of this are actually quite massive. So Russia has a very finite amount of naval warship resources in the Black Sea. That's why they threw a tantrum just last week when Ukraine attacked their ships based in Sevastopol, so right there, with some Ukrainian unmanned, autonomous kamikaze boats. So really interesting stuff there. But now we'll move across to the news, guys. So let's see. So starting off, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine advertised the arrival of the NASAMS air defense systems, but also the Aspired air defense systems into Ukraine as well. Now this is great news, and we don't hear a lot about these Aspired air defense systems. So it's called the Aspired 2000. It was made by Italy and entered service in the very late 90s. Ukraine has recently received one of these Aspired batteries from Spain, and they use these Sparta 2000 missiles with a speed of up to Mach 4, 4 times the speed of sound, a range of 25 kilometers, and a max altitude of 6 kilometers. So this is actually quite good when it comes to an air defense system. So well done, Spain. Cheers. Good work indeed. And then in some other news, Podolyak, an advisor to the head of Ukraine's presidential office, said that Ukraine will negotiate instead with the next president of Russia. And he perhaps voiced it in this way, I guess in hopes that the Russian people will later on overthrow Putin from power. And of course, Putin rigs all elections in his favor, just like he did recently with the illegally annexed Ukrainian territories with all of the referenda there. But really, potentially or very likely, the only way that Uncle Putin will get thrown out of office is when the Russian citizens overwhelmingly have had enough of his poor domestic and obviously poor foreign policies as well. Oh, and in this next tidbit of news, I like it. I find it quite funny. So it's actually a bit of homegrown Russian news. So a group of Russian citizens gathered in Moscow in front of the British embassy to protest against the British aggression on Ukraine, accusing the UK of hitting Sevastopol, the naval fleet, those sorts of things. Now, it's easy to make a lot of jokes here. The first comment would be something like, don't you people have a front line to go to? But looking at it more seriously, just take a look at the demographics of the people here. There's about 8 or so 20-year-old hacker-looking young males, and maybe 1 or 2 females of the exact same age as well. So where is the diversity, such as younger, older, retirees, more females? People sometimes even bring their kids along when they're legitimately protesting something. So in other words, this is what paid protesters look like in Russia. So by day, these guys might protest at another nation's embassy in Moscow, like they've done here, and by night, they are paid Russian propagandist internet trolls who are probably literally in the comments section below. So this is their faces. So I just wanted to give my 5-second spiel on this about how fake this really appears to me. And just quickly, so in another mobilization blunder for the Russian side, so in this video, a mobilized soldier shows us the war pack that he's just been provided, which includes already expired food and a sleeping bag with material you can see through for the sleeping bag. He actually puts it up to the light in this longer video. So yes, never mind the fact that these guys are being transported to a war zone with a geographical longitude of about 50 degrees north, and for which winter is just around the corner. Needless to say, this guy is pretty pissed. No wonder Russia doesn't arm these guys until they're actually on the front lines. And just funny, last funny to round off the day with, I quite like this one. So, buhunkers to the front line. So in this video, we have a whole bunch of retro ancient vans and older Jeep-like automobiles that will be moving right into the Russian war in Ukraine. Now, from intercepted Russian soldiers on the front line, they happen to call these tin cans with no protection whatsoever, and I don't blame them, because they're receiving these things instead, in small numbers, might I add. I heard that 8 or 10 people shared one of these tin cans, instead of, say, a tank or an infantry or armored fighting vehicle. Meanwhile, Ukraine is getting really fancy, strong, tough armored vehicles from all over the globe. And all of this is probably not that surprising. It's quite consistent with Russia's use of older and less effective gear to keep the war machine going. And what's the reason for the continued war? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but all because of one man, because Putin says so. And I would be embarrassed if this was what my country had on offer for me, if my country was going to war. Because this is some major technological disparity. It's just, there is no words for this. Okay guys, so that's about it for today. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, ignore all of the trolls in the comments, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.